and hope that it safely starts recording. So welcome you all formally to this dispersed colloquium with the theme of fragments, giving the fragmentary nature of everyone's participation, but it proves to be a suitably unifying topic for the presentation of the papers in the colloquium this year. And we hand over straight away to Matt Burks and Yungmin Lee from New Orleans to tell us about the text of Papyrus 11 in 1 Corinthians 5. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone from New Orleans. I'll just share what we have here. There we are. So in the critical text, Nestle Lawn 28, 1 Corinthians 5:1 reads as such. And we all can see that there. And then in the manuscript in which we have been researching and studying, P11 reads as such. This is the transcription we will go with in the new update of the CNTTS apparatus update that's forthcoming here, hopefully within the year. When one views the transcriptions of P11, only one previous transcription notes the extra space after the first instance of πορνεια. So if we look at the image from the VMR, this is our questionable character. The INTF's transcription from 1989 notes a space after the word yet. As we can see, there's a character, not just a space, that exists here. So this paper seeks to better understand the paleographical character that occurs after the first πορνεία in 1 Corinthians 5:1 in the manuscript P11. So in order to answer this question, we have three parts of this study. First, Abraham, Yungmin, and myself completed a transcription of P11s. We started from scratch, and Abraham's lovely wife, Sarah, provided a reconciliation of our two transcriptions. So we thank Sarah right now. Second, a quantitative analysis was completed with relevant extant manuscripts and editions of 1 Corinthians 5:1 to measure the textual relationships. And third, we'll have a paleographical analysis of the character in the text, and we'll give various options to explain the presence of this character within the text. So if we do a simple search on P11 in the list, this is the data that we will find. So the manuscript is currently dated to the 6th century based on paleographic grounds. The manuscript contains 24 fragments. The physical manuscript is housed between two locations: St. Catherine's Monastery with the shelf number Harris 14 and the National Library of Russia with the shelf number Greek 258. At St. Catherine's Monastery, 7 fragments contain the following, as you can see there. And then at the Russian National Library in St. Petersburg, 17 fragments contain the following. The manuscript appears to have been used in the binding of another book, according to J. Rendell Harris's work on the manuscript. Often the writing of one folio appears in an awkward position on another folio due to this use of the material as binding. So when a mostly complete fragment of a folio occurs, there's roughly 12 to 13 lines of text on the manuscript. So we'll go over some background on the manuscript real quick. Constantine von Tischendorf first mentioned the manuscript in 1862. The manuscript was denoted as Q in Tischendorf's editions of the Greek New Testament in the Pauline letters. In 1883, the Imperial Public Library at the time in Russia detailed the findings of a new manuscript which was added to their collection that year. And they have a brief mention of a fragmentary manuscript from the 5th century on papyrus with the shelf number 258, as we stated above. In 1890, J. Rendell Harris reported the details of his excursion to St. Catherine's Monastery, which would be our assumption as to where Tischendorf had access to the manuscript as well. Harris noted the fragmentary nature of the manuscript due to its inclusion in the binding of another book. We fast forward to 1936, and E.M. Schofield authored a dissertation on the papyri of the Greek New Testament. He roughly covered from P1 to P52, but didn't cover every manuscript in between. From our research, Schofield is the first to, or was the first to suggest that P11 and P14 were from the same manuscript. When viewing transcriptions of the manuscript, one has several options. First, one can deduce the readings of P11 based on Tischendorf. Moreover, Schofield provides a transcription of several fragments of P11, but not all. In 1967, Kurt Aland provided a book of essays, an edited work of essays on several fragments, and then P11, of course, is noted in there. In 1989, the INTF provided volumes on the papyri of the New Testament. In their volume on the Pauline letters, a critical text was given showing the various readings of papyri extant at a particular location. Also, you can find Philip Comfort has a transcription. So as stated, only the text from the INTF here provides any indication that there's an extra character after the first pornεια in this text. Tischendorf, Kurt Aland, and Philip Comfort do not mention this character. When we think about the Nestle-Aland 28 apparatus, P11 is referenced 22 times, and P14 is not mentioned at all in the apparatus section. And so of those 22 references in the apparatus, 12 of these are vid readings, and I've denoted them as bold in the readings column there. Based on our transcriptions, comparing to the readings found in the Nestle-Aland apparatus, we would say 4 of the uses of vid are questionable, and 2 of the readings we would say that they're wrong in the Nestle-Aland apparatus. These 6 questionable readings, especially those labeled vid, suggest to us that the parameters around the use of vid for this witness, they might be unnecessarily broad. And we'll have a quick discussion here about the 2 readings we would label as wrong. So in 417, we see in the apparatus, it suggests that P11 attests to alto being added after tuto. So if we take a look at the manuscript, we're dealing with the right-hand side of this fragment. This is our transcription. So it'll be on the second line here. And we're really dealing with just a few letters here. But based on our transcription here, we think that there's not enough space to add the alto there after the tuto. The second example is in 614. And we're dealing here on line 6. The ex agari. The Nestle-Aland apparatus suggests that there is the epsilon iota in the last 2 syllables. But if we look here, we've got the C here, epsilon, a gamma, then we have epsilon iota, part of the row missing, and then clearly just an iota here at the end. So we would suggest these 2 we are labeled wrong in the Nestle-Aland apparatus. E.M. Schofield, back in his dissertation on the papyri of the New Testament, remarked that the text of P11 specifically was not very valuable for the purposes of textual criticism. However, he goes on to note that when studied in conjunction with P14, as we would do today, the text of the manuscript lends itself to an Alexandrian text type, with the caveat of knowing where we're going with text types in the field today. So indeed, the highly fragmentary nature of this manuscript lends itself to not being a complete data set on which to draw firm conclusions. Nevertheless, using the data from the CNTTS apparatus, we performed what we believe is the first quantitative analysis of P11, P14. And again, our important caveat is, based on Colwell's suggestion, Colwell and Toon suggesting that you need over several hundred places of variation. We obviously don't have that. We were able to isolate all the significant units, so all the S readings from the CNTTS apparatus. So there were 48 of those readings. And on the slides, you can see the ratios and the percentages a bit better if you want to dig into those later. So we can see here that we have roughly 88% agreement with Ephraemi Rescriptus, Sinaiticus. And these, of course, some of the first manuscripts that agree the most with P11, P14, and the extant variation units, roughly in the past have been classified as Alexandrian witnesses. And of course, the biggest surprising one was the Liste Codex here, in a similar group as the rest. So for later, if you want to look later, we've got the ratios of each reading based on the standard quantitative analysis chart, and then the percentage agreements with those as well. So P1114, as it will be designated in the update of the CNTTS apparatus, is a highly fragmentary manuscript that has generally not received much study. The story of P1114, as the first papyrus mentioned in Tischendorf's editions, generally has been known better rather than knowing anything about the text of the manuscript. Nonetheless, our QA confirms what Schofield suggested almost 100 years ago regarding its type of text. The background information on the manuscript was very helpful in giving context to inform better our discussion of the paleography of the manuscript. And that's Schofield's comments on it being an Alexandrian type text. Moreover, we were lucky enough to find help from the manuscript department at the Russian National Library. And as far as we are aware, we have been working with some of the first color images of P11 and P14. This color image helps shows better some of the paleographical features which we are attempting to study. So now we turn our attention to folio 13 recto to find the text of 1 Corinthians 5:1. This is our transcription of the two sides of the folio. So for our research into this matter, three options presented themselves for our issue. First, the word we suggest would be πορνειας with the sigma at the end. And then syntactically, we would define it as a genitive of direct object. Second, the character could be the relative pronoun ha. However, we have questions as to what this simply could refer to in the text. Or a third option is simply that it's an error in the text. We're going to argue today that it's πορνειας, our first option here. And my colleague, Yungmin, will take it from here.
Thank you, Matt. Πορνειας is a singular reading in 1 Corinthians chapter 5:1 in P1114. The recto side of folio 13 of P1114 shows a character that probably makes the word that contains the character a singular reading. Textual scholars have not considered the character as a letter. However, the researchers suggest the character as a letter. This section shows why, through paleographical observations, an examination of scribal tendency, and grammatical insight. Paleographical observations of the character. The 10 lines of 13 recto includes the second half of chapter 4:20, the full verse 21, and the first half of chapter 5:1. The character belongs to chapter 5:1. The 9th line of the recto contains the character. No detail mention on which is found in works previously published concerning P1114. The character is located between the words πορνεια and kai and is clearly visible. Careful observations exhort the researchers to read the character as a sigma, which would end the word πορνεια. First, the size of the character shows no distinctive difference from that of other letters. Second, the scribe intentionally arranges enough space between the two words πορνεια and kai to locate the character. Third, the character seems to be a letter rather than a mark. Fourth, in fact, the shape of the character looks like the shape of several Greek letters, such as omicron, epsilon, theta, and sigma. The image below shows regular shapes of omicron, epsilon, theta, and sigma in P1114. In general, no dramatic change of the letter's shape appears in P1114, with only few mild modifications. Now, The issue is that the shape of the character is not identical with the shape of one of the suggested letters. Therefore, a more detailed examination of the manuscript, scribe tendency, will help discern the identity of the character. Scribe tendency and the character. P1114 shows several characteristics of the manuscript scribe. First, the scribe normally keeps the size of the letters as regular. 3 exceptions occur in the manuscript, specifically at the end of few lines: 12 verso, 3rd line, 18 verso, 7th line, 15 recto, 7th line. In these exceptional examples, the scribe reduces the size of and the space between letters to finish writing what the scribe has in his or her mind for the specific lines. Therefore, the scribe utilizes flexibility in the size of and the space between the letters as needed. Second, the scribe uses marks in P1114. The most frequently used one is an apostrophe-like shape mark, but the function of the mark seems to be different depending on the location and position of the mark. The chart below illustrates the possible functions of the marks in P1114. For example, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 3 and 5 show breading marks. In verse 3, the mark is located on the upper side between the omega of apodidoto and the first omicron of homoios, functioning as the breading mark of homoios. In verse 5, the mark is located above the epsilon of Vimon as a breading mark. Third, the scribe of P1114 is tolerant of corrections. When correcting a mistakenly written letter or mark, the scribe does not try to remove the ink of the error from the manuscript. Instead, he or she simply adds necessary stroke or strokes, or overwrites the originally intended letter or mark. As a result, a corrected letter's length can become much longer than normal, as the tau in Estin in 7th line of 1 recto, or 2 letters can be partially overlapped, as me in 3rd line of 20 recto, or a letter can lose the symmetry of the shape, as the omicron in hutos in 6th line of 20 recto. Also, the tension caused by an error and correction may result in effect on the next letter or letters, as the sigma of hutos in 6th line of 20 recto. The head of the sigma is longer than normal. In these cases, the next letter or letters show noticeable differences from their regular form or size or position. In the following paragraphs, based on what appears from the examination of scribal tendencies, the researchers analyze the features of the character and present the character as a sigma, which is added to πορνεια. The upper left part of the character shows an unusual thickness, and the shape of the thick part looks like an apostrophe-like mark, which appears most frequently in P1114. The researchers suggest that the scribe mistakenly used the mark right after the word πορνεία and wrote a sigma to correct the error, partially overlapping the mark. Through a careful observation of the character, one can notice another thick portion on the right side of the character. The thick portion of the right side shows a joint-like shape, which means that the character still shows the head, upper part of the thick portion, and the tail, lower part of the thick portion of a sigma, even after the ink smeared into the manuscript. The reduced size and the closer distance between the head and the tail of sigma might have been resulted by the tension caused through the error that the scribe made with the mark. This hypothesis can be supported even further by the homoteleuton in the manuscript the scribe used for his or her work. The transcription below will help understand what the scribe saw in his or her source manuscript. When having copied until Yungmin πορνεία, the scribe mistakenly uses a braiding mark, which is originally for hetes in the next line, due to a confusion caused by the homoteleuton. The scribe corrects the error following his or her tendency. Moreover, the tension produced through the error and correction affects the remaining letters of the line, whose position is lower than normal. Grammatical insights and πορνειας. The addition of the sigma changes the case of the word πορνεία from nominative to genitive, and the word becomes πορνειας. Grammarians of Biblical Greek recognize a unique subcategory of the genitive case. Although the grammarians name the subcategory differently, their essential observation is that some verbs prefer to take the genitive case as direct object of the action that the verbs convey. James A. Brooks and Carlton L. Winberry, Daniel B. Wallace, and Gerald L. Stevens agree that akuo is one of the verbs. Some insights from the grammarians regarding the genitive case with akuo are helpful for discerning the use of πορνεία, probably in a genitive case instead of a nominative case, as shown in P1114. First, Brooks and Winberry note that this specific genitive case does not take a preposition. Regrettably, the manuscript does not provide visible evidence of not taking a preposition due to the lacunae. However, a careful examination of the number of the letters in each line supports the word πορνειας in this manuscript does not take a preposition. The number of the letters of each line in the recto of the fragment ranges between 12 and 17, making an average of 13.9 letters per line. The numbers of the letters of the two lines that contain the word πορνειας count 16 and 17, which already exceed the average 2.1 and 3.1 more letters. The physical environment of the fragment hardly can provide further space for a preposition of the word πορνειας. Second, the verb akuo can have the direct object either in the genitive or the accusative case. While exhorting to be careful for making an interpretive decision, both Wallace and Stevens point out that the meaning of the verb can differ based on the writer's choice of the case. On the one hand, akuo with genitive case may communicate a simple hearing. On the other hand, the verb with accusative case may mean a deeper engagement of the hearer, conveying a more comprehensive facet than a simple hearing. What these grammatical insights suggest is that the verb akuo can take either the genitive or the accusative case as the direct object to deliver a nuanced meaning according to the author's choice. Therefore, the grammatical view allows the character to be a sigma, which is added to πορνεία and makes the word a direct object in the genitive case. Thank you. Matt?
All right, we will go back to our potential options. And as we stated, there are three options that present themselves when you look at the image in 1 Corinthians 5:1. Possibly a sigma, so πορνειας is our first option. The character looks more like the omicron there, so the relative pronoun, or this could be an error. However, we believe the evidence as shown in the color image points to the uncertain character being a final sigma. And grammatically, as we've stated, this is allowed in this instance. Moreover, the damage to the papyrus allows us to make a case for the sigma being originally written at the end of the first πορνεία. As for the second option, grammatically, there's not a possibility for the relative pronoun to be written here. And it's possible, as we stated, that this just could be an error. However, our main argument is that this is a sigma, which changes the word to πορνειας. It can be stated with more certainty, however, that there are two facts that are almost certainly plausible. Number one, that there is a character at the end of the first pornεια in 1 Corinthians 5:1. And our second fact is that none of the previous transcriptions properly label this character. This is not simply just a space as the INTF volume designated in 1989. So beyond these two facts, we've attempted to argue today that the character is best explained from the available evidence as a sigma. This sigma makes the reading pornias instead of pornεια. And this becomes a singular reading here, if indeed the character is a sigma. Nonetheless, we believe, based on our research into the entire manuscript, that the character at 1 Corinthians 5:1 reveals the word pornias. And then some further study. This is just kind of our initial beginnings, and there are some light questions about an epsilon and an alpha in the margins. Has the folio also been re-inked? And then we were very pleased with our collaboration with the individuals at the library in St. Petersburg and hope to continue that relationship. So thank you for listening to us today.
Thank you very much indeed for your paper, and we all clap silently or by using the Zoom reaction as appropriate. We've got time for 2 or 3 questions right away. First, Peter Head has leapt in with a question about Wendell Harris. So Peter, if you're happy to unmute yourself and speak your question or type it into the chat for everybody, that would be great. And anyone else with a question, please indicate in the chat or by putting your hand up on the reactions button.
So thanks for that paper, really interesting. My question was about Wendell Harris, really, in the comment that he made that sometimes the writing on a fragment has come off on an adjacent fragment, so that the damage is a peculiar sort of damage of interference from another page. And I wondered whether you'd taken that into account in looking at this, because there's obviously some interference with the alpha and the iota of the chi, which looks like an epsilon. So is that perhaps the source of how other people have taken this as a gap? And have you, just discuss that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your comment, question. Yeah, that's absolutely a possibility. The only thing that makes us question that is just the space between, which would be the, I guess the alpha and the kappa there. It very well could be the damage from being stuck to another or being in that binding there, and that very well could be the case. Just the exact space. It seems like there was space there for a letter to be written in our initial look at it. So.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to leap in now with a question? We will have an opportunity for discussion later on after the second paper, and we have got to around 4:30. So with nobody leaping in right away, we'll all thank you again, and I will pause this recording so that every paper is dealt with separately.